often the most overlooked fantasy position is the quarterback, and a lot of people punt this position, stream it later on, just pick late guys because they don't see the value in a quarterback. But I think with the emergence of some of the NFL's most elite in the last few years in Lamar Jackson, as well as Patrick Mahomes, the QB position is becoming, as I would say, almost more relevant in the aspect of being drafted early. I would never consider a top QB, let alone a top 5, even top 10 QB in any fantasy drafts, because I was always going after guys in the later rounds. Like last year, I stacked Josh Allen and John Brown in 3 of my leagues. Worked out great for me. 2 years ago, I went after guys like Patrick Mahomes. Like, these young quarterbacks, you have no idea what's going to happen. So they offer so much upside. But the NFL has yet to see guys who can do what Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes can do. And that is dominate with their arms and as well as their legs, putting up some obscene stats. So today we're going to get into our top 10 fantasy QBs. And we are starting that off with Lamar Jackson. And Lamar, he is a phenomenal QB for fantasy. Unbelievable. I mean, not only can he throw last year for 36 touchdowns, he ran for 7 more. He ran the ball 176 times. 176 times for 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. That is basically an RB1 in fantasy football in itself. I mean, he ran for 1,200 yards, 7 yards carry, only lost 2 fumbles. I mean, those are some phenomenal rushing stats. And that's why he's number 1 at my fantasy QB, because he's a game changer with his legs. And do I expect him to run for as much as he did last year? No, not nearly as much, because the Ravens realize it may get them places in the regular season. They might be able to feast on lowly teams like the Bengals, buy this Lamar Jackson, read options, keeps, all that. When it comes to the playoffs against talented defenses who have strong linebackers and safeties who can cover sideline to sideline and make open field tackles, it's not as effective. So I think Lamar's running stats are 1,000% going to be down this year. But he had 1,200 yards rushing. If he can put out 900 yards rushing and get a few more touchdowns, only 7 on the ground, which is very reasonable for some positive touchdown regression, I think his rushing numbers will be just where they were. And I think his passing numbers are going to start to go up just because I think they're going to start to air it out more. I mean, last year, only 401 attempts. I think that's the lowest of any top 10 QB in my fantasy rankings. I expect him to pass the ball way more. I mean, we have Hollywood Brown for a full season, hopefully now. The emergence of Mark Andrews will definitely help. I mean, the weapons aren't great, but they're better than what they were last year. They added some rookie wide receivers in the draft who may be able to contribute over guys like Willie Snead, who's been a career backup, more or less. I mean, I think if Hollywood Brown's able to take a step forward to be that elite Tyreek Hill-esque player, Lamar's passing stats are going to go up. And I just think he's so dominant. If you get him at a good price, good ADP early on, I'm almost okay with taking him, because it's like drafting a QB and a running back in one position. And that's just, there's no other quarterback since Michael Vick who put up such good rushing stats as Lamar. Not even Cam put up rushing stats. 1,200 yards is obscene. That's why he's my QB1 in fantasy this year. But at no surprise, QB2 is Patrick Mahomes. And I understand some people may say he had a down year last year. He was injured. Things weren't going well. Hill was down for a bit. The Chiefs didn't have that elite rookie offensive season. He's going to go back to those 50 touchdowns. And I think he very well could go back to those 50 touchdowns. But, I mean, I think he's going to fall somewhere between those 26 he threw last year and the 50 he threw in 2018. So I expect him to be around, I would say, high 30s, low 40s in passing touchdowns. And he can do some work on the ground. But I just give the edge to Lamar because Mahomes does not have that run element that Lamar does. He only ran for 200 yards last year, 272 in 2018. But I mean, his passing yards have been way higher than Lamar, throwing for 5,000 and 4,000 in the last 2 seasons compared to Lamar's 1,000 his rookie year and 3,000 last year. So he has Lamar in that aspect of his game. But just the rushing stats of Lamar make him a tier of his own. Mahomes is a guy that also is worth consideration at a high pick because he can throw 50 touchdowns as he did 2 years ago. But I mean, their defense is much better than it was, I think, when he came into the league as a rookie. So I don't think he's have as many game scripts where they're going to be up in 40 to 50 point shootouts. I think the Chiefs defense is much better, which is going to limit Mahomes in some of the game scripts where he's going to be playing teams like the Raiders, and it's going to blow him out of the water. And in the third quarter, it's to be checkdowns, running the ball with Clyde and Damian. And the same's going to be going for Lamar, but it's just he's going to get those running stats compared to Mahomes, who's not. Lamar even has a better defense. I just think Lamar's running puts him in his tier of his own. And Pat can get to what he did 2 years ago. But even if he does that, I think Lamar still beats him out as QB1 this year because they're running. I mean, either of these guys are both phenomenal. They're matchup proof every single week. You start them no matter what, no matter who they're playing. Best defense, doesn't matter. It's just you have to get them a good value because I think this year more than ever, the guys I have at QB 8, 9, and 10, I am so fine with taking. And I'm going to get later into another video about QBs that I think are not even get drafted or being drafted as backup QBs who can help you win your league like Patrick Mahomes a few years ago. But now, our QB3, and this is where the drop-off starts to begin after this guy, and that's Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson I have not seen him ranked as QB3 in most any rankings, and I find that crazy. I see guys like Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray ranked at 3 over Russell every single time, and the disrespect is so bad because this guy is the model of consistency, and that's what you need to make sure you're getting when you're drafting a high QB in fantasy football, because these are guys you have to be certain they're going to give you top 5 fantasy potential, start every week, be a matchup advantage on a weekly basis. And Russell has been that the last 4 or 5 seasons. I mean, last 3 years, touchdown count, 31, 35, 34. He's ran for 300 to 500 yards each season over the last 3 seasons. He's thrown for around 4K yards every year, no more, no less. Throws no interceptions. I mean, and meanwhile, he's had a pretty lackluster team around him for the majority of his career. He's getting sacked 40 to 50 times a year, 48 times last year, and he's just a model of consistency. Never injured. I mean, Russell Wilson is unmatched. He's the most consistent QB being drafted in fantasy this year, and I think you have to take him third. If Mahomes and Jackson are gone, Wilson's the guy. I like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett way more than I did last year going into the season. I think that's a great receiving duo. I think Will Disley's returning, who had a great connection with Wilson. They have Greg Olsen, and I also like Wilson this year because that backfield's banged up. Carson's coming off injury. Penny's coming off injury. They did sign Hyde, but I think this year they might let Wilson throw the ball way more because his attempts are relatively high, but compared to some of the other guys on this list, I mean, Dak threw 596 times last year. Wilson threw 516. I mean, he has potential to get a bigger workload, and I think Wilson is so consistent that he has to be the QB3. And now my QB4 is a guy who exploded onto the scene last year and really surprised a lot of people with what good of a fantasy season he had, and that's Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott last year finished as the QB, I think, 3 or 4, throwing for almost 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, all within a run-heavy scheme. And I think Dak surprised a lot of people with his yardage total. It jumped from 3,600, 3,300, 3,800 in his first 3 seasons, all the way to 4,900. His touchdowns jumped around 7 to 8 per year up. And he showed that he can put up monster stats. And I think this year he's going to be fantasy relevant again. I love the addition of CeeDee Lamb for him. I think that Dallas defense got significantly worse, so I expect him to be in a lot of good game scripts, unlike the top three guys who all have pretty good defenses. I think Dallas is going to be playing from behind quite a bit this year. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I just think they're mediocre at best. I mean, his receiving core is unmatched to anyone. I think Blake Jarwin's a competent backup to replace Jason Witten. And even if they rely on Zeke 20 to 25 carries a game and run the ball with Pollard, I just think the yardage totals are going to be there. They're going to drop off maybe a little bit from last year, but I just think I have less concern with Dak because after one season you could be skeptical, but I think that I'm safer with picking him because Dallas's defense is not going to be good, and they're not going to be as grounding and pounding every game because they're up big, because they're not going to win a lot of games. They're not going to be a double-digit win team, which will definitely help Dak down the year with a lot of favorable game scripts, and that's why he's going to throw for around 5,000 yards, I believe. So, Dak Prescott after Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has to be that third quarterback. If he's not, I don't know what you're doing, man. But now moving on to our QB5 is a guy that might surprise a lot of people. It's Deshaun Watson. And despite losing DeAndre Hopkins, I have a lot of faith in Deshaun Watson. And for one reason, similar to Dak Prescott, it's because I expect the Texans to be in a lot of high-scoring games. They don't have a good defense. It's average. It's okay. I mean, they're not going to be a high-win team. They're going to be playing to score. They're going to be winning with high amounts of points. He's never really relied on other guys other than DeAndre Hopkins. Always that safety blanket. Now I think this year the Texans took the wide receiver by committee approach. And yes, are there a lot of injury-prone guys in there with Kenny Stills, Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Will Fuller, Kiki Kuti? Yes, there are. But I think as a group currently, they're all healthy. And that's a very good receiving core. I understand people may be skeptical. Oh, Hopkins is there. His yardage totals are going to go down. He only threw for 3,800 yards last year. Hopkins' season was not that spectacular. I don't think Watson needs Hopkins. I think Hopkins needs Watson more than Watson needs Hopkins. And I think this year, especially, Watson's going to rely on his legs a lot more. And he's a good, capable runner already. Last year ran for 413 yards and 7 touchdowns. Year prior, 551 on the ground plus 5 touchdowns. Those are some good rushing stats. Those are going to keep you consistently with weekly starts, because despite playing maybe an elite 49ers defense, he'll get you 30, 40 yards on the ground, maybe a touchdown, just to keep you at those 16 to 18-point weeks against those stronger opponents. I think Watson doesn't take a step back. I expect the same season as he produced last year. Losing Hopkins does not concern me. I think David Johnson is a nice addition to that passing game. I think Duke Johnson and David Johnson out of the backfield is much better than Watson's ever had to deal with. Just Lamar Miller and Carlos Hyde, just not great backs. I think the receivers are going to get it done. Will they get banged up? Yes, but I have faith for them to be good enough for Watson, who will have to carry the team on his back, but he can do that. He's an elite QB. He can get it done. And now, the hype train has finally arrived, and we have Kyler Murray at QB6. And I know people are going to be saying, Kyler Murray should be at 3, ahead of Russell Wilson, ahead of Dak Prescott, ahead of Deshaun Watson. And it's just wrong. I'm going to get into it right now. I mean, last year, Kyler Murray threw for 3,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, ran for 500 yards, which is great on the ground, and 4 touchdowns, which made him fantasy relevant. But he didn't even eclipse the 4,000-yard mark and threw for 20 touchdowns, 24 touchdowns in total. He played a full of 16 games. He had a full offseason to work last year. He was going to start from day one. We all knew that. And I just think we are projecting a breakout. No question, he will have better stats than last year. It's just, what extent can you project an uptick in production? And that's where I'm going to draw the line. I mean, 10 touchdowns more passing, 1,000 yards more passing. I mean, it's a hard projection to make. And why I'm skeptical, and what the Cardinals didn't address in the offseason, is the offensive line. They drafted Josh Jones, but other than that, they really didn't do anything to fix the offensive line that Murray a mobile quarterback who runs an extremely fast 40, got sacked 48 times last year, which is a lot. It's a very high number. And you're putting in a rookie tackle who I was higher on than most, I think, but got drafted in, I believe, the 3rd round. He may not even start. Guys like Justin Pugh played well last year. I don't think he went down. He's injury prone. I'm pretty sure DJ Humphries is injury prone. That offensive line is far from a sure thing. And people are acting like, oh, Kyler got such better skill positions this year. Did they get DeAndre Hopkins? Yes, they did. But other than that, I mean, it's the same exact team he played with last year. And is DeAndre Hopkins worth 10 more touchdowns and 1,000 more yards to Murray's stats? I don't know. I thought last year their wide receiver core wasn't that bad. Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, Kenyon Drake out of the backfield. That's not that bad. I mean, Kyler Murray will be good. I may be bashing him right now, but I just don't get the top 3 hype. At QB6 is where I have him ranked, and I think that's a very fair ranking for Murray. I expect him to be a almost weekly starter, but you also have to factor in one thing that I think a lot of people overlook is he plays in a tough division. He's got to play Seattle twice, San Fran twice, the Rams twice. There's no easy team like the Redskins or the Bengals, which you can just feast on for an easy 2 40-point games. I mean, Murray's going to have it tough. The Cardinals were the worst team last year in that division, and I think this year they're going to have to play extremely well against these elite teams because those teams all have pretty good defenses, especially San Fran. Those are 2 tough games. In Seattle is very tough. I just think Murray you have to temper expectations. Could I be completely wrong? And he takes a year 2 Mahomes like jump. I mean, definitely he could do that, but I just think this is not the breakout year for Murray because that offensive line is concerning. That division is very tough, and his rookie season is being a bit overhyped. Would we be saying the same about Kyler this year if there was no DeAndre Hopkins? And I think we wouldn't be, because Deshaun Watson is a better QB than Kyler Murray. You cannot change my mind. And look at Deshaun Watson's fantasy finish last year. It wasn't top 3. I mean, I just think the addition of DeAndre Hopkins is a bit overrated. I think it's more so just the offensive line as a whole. Look at the top 3 guys. Baltimore, terrific offensive line. Kansas City, terrific offensive line. Dak Prescott, terrific offensive line. Russell Wilson, not that great of an offensive line, but he has shown us that he doesn't need one to excel. Can Murray be like Russell Wilson? I don't know yet. That's why I have Wilson over him, because I've seen Russell Wilson dominate on a yearly basis. But I'm still happy with Murray as a QB1. Now, another young QB who I think a lot of people are going to be having lower on their list is Josh Allen. And Josh Allen last year was a guy I was very high on the entire offseason. I saw a guy who's going to win with his legs, especially in fantasy. I liked the addition of John Brown and Cole Beasley because they had no wide receivers the year prior in 2018 as rookie season. And he had a great season for fantasy. I don't care, guys, at all, if he wins games, if he's a good actual NFL QB. Doesn't matter. But as far as fantasy goes, he is tremendous. I mean, he ran for 510 yards last year, 9 touchdowns on the ground, 17 touchdowns in a career, 28 games on the ground. That's almost 2 every 3 games. I mean, that's great. And I think he has even more room to grow than Murray, because last year, Allen only threw for 3,000 yards. And this year, we got Stephon Diggs. And that's the first real NFL wide receiver he's playing with that's in his prime. That's great. And I think Allen's taking a step forward this year. But why I have Allen behind Murray, despite, I guess, most agreeing with Allen behind Murray, is because they have an elite defense. And that defense is going to keep their opponents in low scores, which is not going to allow Allen to really throw that deep ball, which he would like as much as he may want to, because they're going to be in favorable game scripts where they're going to be pounding it with Zach Moss, Devin Singletary on the ground. But I expect Allen at the very least to replicate the season he did last year, which was a QB6 finish on the year, and that's why I'm at QB7. I expect more or less the same finish. If Stephon Diggs is truly going to emerge as an elite wide receiver, that will definitely help Josh Allen out. But I think expectations for Allen to be a top 3 breakout are a bit lofty because of that elite defense. the game scripts are a huge thing for fantasy QBs, and I think he's going to have a lot of the games where in the third quarter they're going to be beating a team like the Jets 25, 28 to 7, and he's not going to be throwing the ball anymore, which is why I have Josh Allen at QB7. Now, we have a guy who is playing his farewell tour, Drew Brees. And I think Drew Brees is a guy that's ranked way lower than I expect from Drew Brees standards. I mean, what have we seen over the last couple years? Nothing but consistency for Drew. Last year, he was banged up for the first time really ever in his career, had one of his worst seasons, but he was on pace to have one of his career seasons for fantasy. 11 games, 27 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, and okay, you may be concerned, is he getting injured more now? He's old, he's really old. Guys, he got sacked 12 times last year. 12 times in 11 games. He's going to be perfectly healthy because that offensive line will keep him upright. And this year, I think Drew Brees potentially has the best weapons he has had in his entire career. Out of the backfield, he has Alvin Kamara. At wide receiver, he has Michael Thomas. Now Emmanuel Sanders, who is not getting any hype as an addition that I think is so underrated. Will Emmanuel Sanders be relevant in fantasy? To be seen. But as a wide receiver too, I mean, Drew Brees has never had a wide receiver too. Back in the day when he was throwing 34, 37, 39 touchdowns, that was to Ted Ginn, Traquan Smith at wide receiver too. Guys that are just good because the Saints air raid offense. I mean, and then now he is also the reliable tight end in Jared Cook, who showed that he can run the seam, score touchdowns, and I think the Saints are just going to be an offensive juggernaut next year. I love Brees also because he's playing in a dome, no bad weather games. Division is tough. It's very difficult division, but I think a lot of those teams are very offensive oriented. The Bucks offensive first team, Panthers offensive first team, Falcons are an offensive first team. Those are all very high scoring games, and I think that Drew Brees this year will pick up where he left off pre-injury and put together a really good season. The only reason I have him below the guys of Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, and Josh Allen is because they're going to do it with their legs where Brees is not. And when it comes down to it, if you have 6-point rushing touchdowns for QBs, you always pick the running QB over the passing QB. And that's why Drew Brees is at QB8, and that's higher than majority of people have Drew Brees ranked. I see him consistently QB10, QB11, 10th, 11th, 12th round. I am drafting that every single day right now. I usually wait on a QB, but picking Drew Brees in the 10th, 11th, and 12th round is maybe my favorite value QB pick right now because I think he is fed up with choking in the playoffs. He wants to go out this year, retire on a high note, just dominate the NFL and show them I can win more than one Super Bowl. I am an NFL great QB, and I am going to dominate this season. I love Drew Brees going into this year, and he might be my favorite value pick out of all the guys in the top 10. But now we have one of his competitors in that NFC South, Tom Brady. And it's always hard to project when a player switches teams because we don't have anything to gauge our projection off of. We just expect things based off of what he did last year and what the team he went to did last year. And Brady got all overlooked last year. Everyone's like, oh, he's fallen off a cliff. And yes, he's not that Tom Brady who went 16-0 with Randy Moss back in the day. He's not that Tom Brady. But last year he finished as QB12. QB12, throwing to N'Keal Harry, who was awful, Mohamed Sanu, who was a slot receiver at best, and Julian Edelman, who was, I believe, 30-something years old, with a poor offensive line and a phenomenal defense, which made him never have to throw the ball. So, I have him at QB9. He's getting the additions of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Rob Gronkowski to be one of the best skill groups he's played with in the last 5 years of his career. Tampa has a pretty average defense. It's underrated, but it's still pretty average. He'll have to be throwing in way, way better game scripts this year because they will not be holding opponents to less than 10 points as they did last year. Last year, he threw for 4,000 yards and 24 touchdowns, and those numbers are bound to go up. I expect Brady to get back into the 30 touchdown mark and the mid 4,000s in yards. And could he be a total bust this year? Fall off exactly like Peyton Manning did? Yes. And that's why I have him at QB9, because there's definitely more risk with Brady than any of the guys ahead of him. But I mean, I don't think Brady's falling off. I don't see it. I think he still has a lot left in the tank. He doesn't have to rely on his arm strength. He's a very efficient passer. Guys like Chris Godwin are going to thrive with Brady. I don't know about him for fantasy wide receiver status, but an NFL player connection, they're going to be so good next year. I mean, he could be a bust. He's very boomer bust, but I think as QB9, he fits the mold of being a low-end QB1 with upside of being a high-end QB1, and I think that he has more left in the tank. But the likes of the young guys like Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, all runners, all better offense, all just more explosive, are better in it for him in fantasy. But I mean, Brady's the consistent. He was QB12 last year, and we're saying, oh, he's washed, because we expect to see that best QB in the league for fantasy football. And I mean, he's not going to be that anymore. He's going to be Tom Brady, the guy who is efficient, takes what the defense gives him, and lets his playmakers make plays. And that's a QB9 this year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the QB10 slot on my top 10 fantasy QBs was the hardest one to do. There are many notable guys who I still love, and I will get into in a later video. But I had to go with Carson Wentz this spot. I turned down the likes of Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, even Daniel Jones got some consideration for QB10. But I gave it to Carson Wentz, and that's because I like how the Eagles address their receiving core this year. Is it good? Yet to be seen, but is it better? I can for sure say it's better than last year. Alshon Jeffrey may start the year on the PUP. That's okay. Deshaun Jackson is healthy. Jalen Reagor. I like the underrated addition of Marquise Goodwin. Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz look to be there. And now they have some receiving backs, it looks like, in Boston Scott and Miles Sanders, who could be a competent, maybe 3 down back. And yes, the injuries do concern me for Wentz, but they're blown out of the water. In the last 4 years, he's only missed a total of 8 games. And is that a decent amount of games? It's not that many. I mean, considering one was an ACL injury, it's not that bad. Last year, you can say he got hurt in the playoffs. It was a concussion against Clowney. I mean, it's a trivial injury. I wouldn't project a concussion for a QB who's never had a concussion history. But Wentz has phenomenal upside because we saw him perform at an MVP level in 2017, where through 13 games, he had 33 touchdowns to 7 picks. And will he replicate that? No, he can't. That was a phenomenal season for a Super Bowl contending team. But I like Philly's receiving core more than most, I would say. I think Reagor is a very talented player. We dropped a scouting report on him on our Instagram. We had him ranked very highly with the likes of top 5 wide receiver in this class, on the rookie class. I think Deshaun Jackson still has a lot left in the tank. And even if you get 5 games out of Deshaun Jackson, the dominant deep threat, Marquise Goodwin is a guy who can emerge onto the scene to be helpful for Philly this year. He's shown he can be really good at times. I think 2 years ago when George Kittle emerged, he was the wide receiver option for the 49ers. And Jeffrey is good when he's on the field. People don't give him credit for. I don't have the stat in front of me, but the per-game splits with Jeffrey and without Jeffrey are night and day for Wentz. He thrives with Jeffrey on the field. The stats are significantly better. And he may start the year slow, Jeffrey, but I think he'll be out there at some capacity. And Wentz showed last year, even with terrible wide receivers, Greg Ward as your wide receiver 1, he threw 27 touchdowns to 7 picks. He has a high floor and an extremely high ceiling. I love the upside. I also think he's a lot going for him, being in the NFC East, getting to play a bad Dallas defense, a awful Giants defense, and a pretty bad to average Redskins defense 6 times in a year. It's a lot. Those are 6 games that are going to be very easy for Wentz to put up very good fantasy numbers, which I think he will do. I'm a Giants fan, and I think he'll put up great numbers against a secondary that has a rookie safety. Jabril can't stay healthy. DeAndre Baker might be behind bars now. I mean, how's he going to cover Deshaun Jackson? I mean, I think Wentz was the right pick to put at QB 10, but I understand if you think the guys of Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan deserve that spot. But I will be getting into mid-tier QB values in a future video. But that concludes my top 10 list. I understand that it's controversial, so leave your opinion down below in the comment section on what you would change. And I'll make sure to get back to you with more stats and number crunching to help you see what I see with these QBs. And throughout this week, I'm going to be putting out some more top 10 rankings, maybe getting into some draft strategies, and I think releasing a boomer bust player video this coming weekend. So make sure to stay tuned, and as always, like and subscribe, and make sure to check us out on Instagram at Gridiron_guys_YT.